Hey everybody, welcome back to Adam Makes Beer, and today we are going to be with our friends from Wing, and I'm going to be taking a deep dive with one of their brewers named Colton, and we're going to be going really kind of a deep dive in on their process on mashing in, Vorlauf, lauter. It's going to be a good way for you to get an idea of what the brewer is kind of doing day to day when he's responsible for a brew day at Wing. And it should be a really good time. I have to tell you, I had a blast being in there with everybody. The folks at Wing were just so great. I'm super grateful that they got me in there to kind of do this collab with them. It was a lot of fun. Now, as we jump into the video, we're gonna right away look at how they're cleaning their smalls, or like all of their small parts. Every brewery has a little bit different way of doing this. I think they have a pretty cool one. We're gonna look at some of the different implements, some of the different tanks that are utilized in the brewing process. We're gonna see a little bit of how and when they'll be working on sanitizing the tank that they're going into, the fermenter they're going into. It's gonna be a lot of fun, so check it out. I'm always interested in seeing how people are cleaning their smalls. You can see right over here, we have our trays of cleaned goodies. How's my shot? Pretty good. We have all of our clean parts right there. And we have this little vessel over here. Boom. We have this guy, which they can fill with caustic at the end of the brew day and soak all of their small parts in. I like that quite a bit. I think it's cool. It's always really important to make sure that we are hitting up those smalls with various chemical soaks, circulations. All that stuff is really key. Okay, so as far as some of the different vessels go for the brew day, you're gonna see right over my shoulder here, you're gonna see the HLT, and then right next to that is the CLT. Boom. Key vessels for the entire brew day. For instance, the HLT can be used for anything from mashing in, supplying hot water for various cleaning operations. CLT, which is not something that I've always used, coming from Michigan where the groundwater is usually colder, but the groundwater here is warmer. And the CLT will be used a lot of times on the heat exchanger for the water source for the heat exchanger. Sometimes also, you can use both the HLT and the CLT to blend your water to hit the mash temperature that you want to be hitting in the mash. All right, and then you can see we end up pulling these banners down, exposing all of the underworkings of the tanks. This gives the brewer the ability to access all of the valves and wort tree and everything that's going to be running on underneath the tanks, and some different pumps if need be. And pretty soon we're going to get running on mashing. So I see you working a couple of valves there.
Yeah.
What do you have going on?
So right now I'm adjusting my temperature. This is our valve tree.
Okay.
We have hot water, cold water.
Yep.
And what I'm doing is just mixing the two. Coming up through here is going to the mash tun. I'm preheating it right now. I'm shooting it for about 166, which I'm just about right on right there.
Okay.
And once I get 25 gallons in, I can go ahead and shut it off. I'm going to go down there, close up some valves, and then I'll actually start filling it up.
And then you're tracking temp right here,
yes,
and then
sir.
ultimately your flow meter right here.
Yes.
Nice. How easy is that to dial in temperature-wise?
It's a lot easier than you would think, actually. Since we basically run it hot water wide open, you only have to really adjust your cold water to bring your temperature in. Yeah, it's a little bit, can make like a 1 or 2 degree adjustment pretty easily.
Yep.
So.
And I've had it before where you're kind of battling it a little bit, and that's nice to have it running well.
Yeah, it can happen like if there's more than one person calling for water in the brewery. This is drawing from our cold liquor ton and our hot liquor ton. Okay. So if someone's drawing from either one at the time, you'll lose flow in the pumps that run it. And then you can kind of get a little bit of variance, but nothing too bad. Sure,
yeah, I was about to ask about that. And it's always so nice to have that flow meter in line and just have everything all plumbed in.
It is.
I've worked at some different places where it's kind of like, I don't know, you're just struggling with it.
Yep. Let me see. I always had to look down there. It's like it's pretty much dialed in at this point, and right now it's running pretty smooth.
For sure.
Knock on wood.
So are you preheating or already dropping your water in at this point?
Right now this is our base water. So our steps for mashing in, we go preheat, base water, and then we start mashing in.
Nice.
So our preheat, we use about 25 gallons. We use 100 gallons for our base just to get some water in there.
Yep.
And then once 100 gallons is in there at the proper temperature, I'll start dropping in our grist and we can get that mash going.
I don't know why. I always think that the mash tun is always like one of the better looking tanks.
Yeah.
It's the one about
fun.
the cool shiny stuff in it, right?
Has moving parts in there.
Exactly.
Has something going on.
Exactly. And then it looks like there's this big grist hopper. You can see GH right there.
Yes,
and that runs all the way up to the ceiling here.
We actually mill in right there behind you.
Okay.
That's our mill. So we have
Nice.
a flex auger that moves all the grist that we pour in there up to our mill that's up there. And the other flex auger actually pours it down into this.
Okay, nice. And you can see that this mash water is actually coming in right in the side, right here. Boom, right in through there into that grist hydrator. I was blanking on it for a second. But you can also see this Sparging right here. Yeah. Sweet. So at this point, it's still just feathering that mash water temperature back and forth a little bit, and then also going to be tracking the flow meter and everything like that to make sure that our temperatures are correct, the water's flowing at the appropriate rate, and then we're going to start dropping some grain into this mash. What beer are we running today?
We're doing Radio Vision today.
Okay.
So and hazy IPA.
Oh, nice. Excellent.
Yes.
Yeah.
So today's a 30-barrel brew day. So the way we're doing this beer, and with a lot of our beers we do this, we will do multiple batches.
Yep.
So today I'm just doing one batch. It's not a double brew day. Some days we can more than one day.
Yep.
Today's just 30 barrels, so it'll go into a fermenter. It'll start fermenting, and then we'll come in tomorrow. And I think the other brewer, Chris, will be in tomorrow, and he'll brew the second batch, going right into the same fermenter.
Yeah.
And we'll get a 60-barrel batch out of that.
Nice. And it's a good way to be able to, you don't have to add as much yeast. You can get that thing going and cropping up. That's awesome.
Yeah, we can do all the way up to a quadruple batch if we want. So
Nice.
120 barrels. That goes into some of our bigger fermenters.
How long does a turn take you? Like if you're doing, because it's a 30-barrel system?
Yeah.
Okay, so how long does that 130-barrel turn take in general?
So a brew day can take anywhere 6 to 8 hours generally. That's a good point where you can kind of gauge. Some beers are easier. Some beers just like less demanding hop schedule, less grain and grist outs, things like that. So some days are shorter, some days are longer.
Yeah.
So some days, like yesterday, was a relatively long brew day. If I remember, it was a 10 ton. 10 tons are a big beer, oatmeal stout. So that one's definitely a little bit of a longer brew day.
For sure.
Certain days also matter because of our first brew that we do on this one. So there's a little extra responsibilities. So there's cell counts for yeast. On this one, I'll be pitching yeast into this fermenter from yeast that we harvested off a previous batch. So we do cell counts on that to make sure we get proper yeast counts and viability and things like that. That just adds a little bit of time on the day, so it just depends. Yeah.
You're very comfortable doing this.
I actually, like I said, I used to work at another brewery, and it was it was at Carillon Historical Park. I was at Carillon Brewing Company, and part of it was I was actually hired through the education department. Nice. So basically public speaking, talking, and educating people is something I have a decent background in.
Well, it's a skill set, though, man. You know what I mean? And and the funny thing is, so I taught for 10 years before getting into the brewing industry. So I'm used to being in front of people, used to doing my thing, but starting to record yourself, it's a whole different animal. You know what I mean? And so, man, you do great.
I haven't delved into the realm of recording myself yet.
The first time I did something that was recorded, there was a little TV show that came through. I think it was called The Great American Brew Trail, and they did an episode at the brewery I was at. I felt like a Muppet. I didn't know what to do with my arms. They were just like hanging here, and like everything, I get really pale. And it's like I've been talking to people forever. Like, anyways.
There it goes.
Smells so good. It's actually a very quiet mashup.
Yeah. It's surprising.
Yeah,
it will get noisy here in a bit when I'm done mashing in. We'll be milling in for tomorrow.
Okay.
Once that mill gets going, it'll be won't be nice and tranquil.
I bet. Yeah, you can see this coming down, right down through this grist hopper now, through the grist hydrator, and then down into the mash tun. It's funny, sometimes it's the little things. It's been probably a month since I turned Wort, and it smells good, man. That doesn't stop, like, that portion of it doesn't stop being fun.
No.
You know what did you ever make beer at home?
Oh yeah, I still do.
Yeah, okay,
Definitely.
nice.
I probably have invested way too much of my personal money in brewing equipment. But yeah, I have my own little brewing setup at home.
So what's your brewing setup like at home?
So it's about a 5-gallon setup,
Yep.
so it's nothing serious. It's just perfect to keep like a 6-to-1 on a kegerator.
Yeah.
So I have a little kegerator in my basement. My brother and I have like a bar thing set up and everything. So
Yeah.
A little drain for all their brew system and a spike fermenter. So nothing too special. Buying nice equipment makes it easy.
Yeah.
But definitely finding the storage area for that's the biggest thing. Having a dedicated spot in the basement can make things pretty cluttered. It's a hobby.
Well, and I think it's valuable from an experimentation, and especially from a recipe development standpoint. I'm starting to do a recipe writing workshop on the YouTube channel, and sometimes when you're making beer professionally, there's advantages and disadvantages. It's a good opportunity to understand, because you have access to recipes and the beers and how they come out. So you have like templates, right? But you're pretty much stuck using the ingredients that you're using. And so for experimentation, understanding flavor development, there's far more opportunity on the home side to be able to do those turns more often.
Absolutely,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's another advantage of just the scale. So that's why we also have our pilot system. Like I said, our other brew days in Springboro. That's our pilot system. So it's a small brewing setup that we have going on there. And we can use that and we can play around with some more fun things on that system.
Do you brew over there ever, or are you always here?
I brew over there as well. So it just depends. Like, we'll split up labor depending on what's going on. So if I submit a new recipe to make and we're doing that, I'll go down there and brew it. If the other brewer has a recipe he submitted, vice versa. So he has that. So actually he's doing down there. I think he's redoing one of his beers that he did previously, actually. So he's down there just making sure that's being taken care of. I believe he's just transferring it over from a fermenter to a bright tank so it can drop clear and get it ready for kegging. All right.
So between those two systems, two questions. Mm-hmm. What's easier to brew on and what's more fun to brew on?
See, like, I think both of them kind of even out, because this is obviously much bigger. You have a lot of things that's going on with it. But everything is set up in such a way that everything flows really nicely. So everything has its place, and it's just the nice toys and all the fun equipment we have here make things really kind of fun and a little easier. But again, it's the scale. So we're getting rid of more grain. We're moving around heavier items. So I just had to check if we're still going in. So that can have its advantages and disadvantages. And a smaller, we have less of the fun toys down there. So when we clarify beer, we're not running into a centrifuge down there, things like that. So there's a trade-off, really. If I had to choose which one's funner, though, I think the smaller systems are always a little more fun. You have your nice little chill brew days that you're going on. Not much heavy lifting, things like that. And again, you get to play with the fun stuff then. You can do the experimental things. I always find that fun.
So functionally, right now, if you find that your mash is either running too thick or too thin, what are your variables that you manipulate on this side in order to do that? So if you started running too thick, can you increase water volume coming in, or is that static?
I usually just try to keep the least amount of variables going on. So I keep my water pretty constant, and I adjust how much grain's going in.
Yeah,
so
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so controlling those variables, there's less guesswork involved. So I keep so right here, I notice my mash is maybe a little thick, so if I want, I can just kind of do something like this, wiggle this out maybe a half an inch to an inch. Things will thin out a little bit. And I just keep my constant temperature going in over here. That's why I'm constantly checking this in case someone starts drawing water or something like that. Things can fluctuate, especially as the volume of the kettle start to go down a little bit. So I'm just keeping an eye on everything.
I remember early on, it always used to be like one of those panic things where you're looking at and you're like, oh, it's getting too thick. It's like, slow it down.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
and then you eventually you learn to eyeball it.
Yes,
like,
you
know what things should look like.
Yep.
And that's a big important thing.
Yep.
Your sensory skills are extremely important when it comes to something like this.
I agree, and especially when you do have flow meters, temperature probes, different things like that, you can look at all those things and they can tell you what's going on, but it's also good to understand as much visually as what's happening, right?
Definitely.
Because if one of those things breaks, or sometimes it's those subtle things that can let you know something's wrong before anything else. Very cool. And flaked oats do not go through the mill. And so we're just going to be adding these directly into the mash tun as we go. The fan here is nice.
Yeah. It's definitely saves you from some of those hotter days. Especially when they actually turn the heat on in the building when it gets cooler outside.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, it gets a little miserable up here.
Well, I don't think people realize, I mean, we're up in the air. You know what I mean? And heat definitely rises.
Oh, yeah. Especially that grain loft right there.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of heat.
How long does mashing typically take? I know it'll be a little longer depending on volume of grain and everything like that, but
I'd say a solid maybe 30 minutes.
Okay.
From start to finish.
Sure.
I'm counting from when I start preheating to the time I'm done.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So this will eventually kind of dry on and crust onto the sides.
Yeah.
I prefer it to be in the mash and doing its job and sitting somewhere it shouldn't be. Add off of there. And then the small amount of water you add into this hose makes absolutely no difference to the temperature or anything like that.
Absolutely. It makes a much bigger difference with your cleanup toward the end than you might think it does.
All the bits of dried on stuff. It's just stuff they have to clean up later, a little more time on.
Exactly.
Record keeping is another big part of it. He goes ahead and tracks that stuff as we go. It's a big deal when it comes to repeatability, tracking quality issues, different things like that.
Colton is taking a temp on the mash tun, while he's also heating the sterilization water for the Wort line in the kettle.
On the mash. And then how much water is going into the brew kettle? Okay.
Spraying on the lid right there.
Yep.
It's running onto our CIP ball. It's constantly going in a loop, and it has the steam jackets open right now.
Okay.
So just more surface area touching with steam and heating up that water for it.
Yep.
The control for the heat is
Okay. And so is this just right now circulating in the kettle?
Yes.
Okay. And then when you hit that temp, that's when you can go ahead. And are you circulating it, or are you just kind of a one-time push through?
Just gonna be a one-time push through.
Yep.
Maybe about 200 gallons, like I said earlier, through the heat exchange over there. So our heat exchanger says a lot of tubing, a lot of piping. So
Yep.
a lot of tiny little nooks and crannies that are hard to get to. So by
It's true.
putting excess amount of water to it, and you get that whole thing up to like 200 degrees, you know everything is good to go.
Absolutely. How long does it take you to run this water through there?
Probably about 15 to 20 minutes.
For sure. Looks like we're going to be going ahead and setting up this sterile loop for the heat exchanger. Here's our heat exchanger right here. Retracting this through, and he's setting up this runoff line, our Wort line, in order to get this beer into the cellar. So we now have this loop just about built. You can see it's looping around right behind him. We're coming back over here. And he's going to be building out parts. Looking like a block and bleed that he's building right now. And I guess there's going to be a sight glass on that. We've shown you that block and bleed before. All right, and so he has this block and bleed ready to go right here, and we're circulating this. We're pushing that hot water through the heat exchanger right now. So that way we're going to be able to sterilize that heat exchanger.
So I'm getting ready to start our Vorlauf, so we're going to recirculate the mash. I'd like to just open this up for a second so I can see what starts going in there.
Sure.
If you keep an eye on that sight glass right there, you actually see this start going through. If I open up my valve down at the bottom, it's our pump control of this control panel here.
Okay.
That's set to about 40%.
Yep.
And there we go. We are moving.
Sweet. You can see that moving from some heavier, kind of grain heavy wort, and then that's going to start clearing up over the course. And then what kind of, okay, so kind of like the dentist mirror kind of thing. Yeah, I've seen that one. That's pretty sweet. And then it just recirculates over the top of the mash. And how clear does this usually end up running for this beer?
This one we're not looking too clear, obviously. It's a hazy IPA.
Yep.
So all that stuff that's in there, it's kind of a moot point on clarity, I suppose.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see it nearly as clear as you would something like Trotwood or Fly Light or something like that.
Yep.
So it'll clear up a bit. You'll mostly just see all the heavy sediment come out.
Yes.
All those like actual granules that you can see going through disappear.
Yep.
It'll still be a fairly like hazy product.
Sure. How long does Vorlauf usually take on this?
15 minutes.
15 minutes?
Yeah.
Sweet,
That's generally
brother.
what we do for just 15 minutes for Vorlauf for just about everything.
All right, and then you're going to go ahead and start continue milling in, correct?
Yes, sir.
Nice. Is that mill running right now?
It is. So
That's not noisy, man.
well, this is not the mill itself. This is just a.
That's just the hopper.
hopper.
Yeah.
You can see this is a flex auger that starts here.
Yep.
It goes out through this wall. It goes up into the loft above us.
Yep.
The mill is that droning noise you kind of hear in the background
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
And then it sends it with another flex auger into the grist hopper there.
Definitely. Sweet, brother. Thank you. How much longer on that Vorlauf, man?
Actually, just turned it off.
Oh yeah, look at that! I just got it. All right, so Vorlauf is wrapped. We're going to be running down here. Rerouting to the kettle now. Nice. All right, so let's head up the brew deck and check out where we are at with the mash tun, because we are lautering our wort over to the kettle, and we are also sparging. Let me see if I can get you some video of sparging. Okay, so we're running wort to the kettle, but let's get this angle. Okay, see right there, you can see one of the one of the sparge spray heads. There's another right there and right there. All right, so as we have the brew day running, we are going ahead and building this fermenter for running a sanitizing cycle on it, so it'll be ready to do. Let me mess with my light thing. What will my light do? My light doesn't do too much. Yeah, so we have our pump right over here. And just as you've always seen on a SOP video that I've done, as far as that goes, we're running Sani through the bottom of the tank into the face of the pump, and then back up and through the spray ball right over here. So that's another responsibility of the brewer on shift. So he's both sterilized the wort line and has sanitized his fermenter, so he'll be ready to knock out. And then we have the rest of the cellar packaging team working on the can line today. Okay, we are about to wrap up the lauter. Let's go check it out, what this looks like after the sparge is done, and then when we have most of the work run over to the kettle. Ooh, I'm gonna have to flip you around. Hot footage. We're in the kettle. It's moving. We are at Warped Wing. Sweet, man. But this is gonna start filling up. Once we are at kettle full and we have that boil running, that is when we will have any kettle additions, and we'll keep rolling through this brew day. I keep looking at the wrong part of the camera. The camera's down here. The camera's right there. We have our mash tun grain port right here, grain dump port, and we're dropping into these blue barrels. I'll get you some footage from the other side too. So that's our situation right now. Coming up to boil in the kettle and starting to grain out in the mash tun. Let me go give you a look of the other side of this panel, or the other side of this, the other side of the grain out area. I'll take the long way. Okay. Nice and full. That's a cool dolly. I'm jealous. Check out this awesome dolly. I didn't even know these things existed for these, but apparently they do. Apparently I'm not that smart. You can see your port right here. Boom. There's a door that you open up, and he has that rake going and is now dropping grain into the grain out bins. And so that rake, do you drop that that plow? Do you drop that periodically, or does it kind of do that on its own? Is it manual? I see.
Manual, yeah. So yeah, you drop it a little bit starting out. So I usually get most of the barrel full without dropping it, just get some out. Then I'll drop it to about this point, not that much slack left over.
Yep.
Once it gets to a certain point, I drop it all the way and get everything out.
Awesome, man.
Don't put too much stress on it.
Yeah, absolutely.